Hello, everyone. Good evening. My name is Carla Marrinan Funder, and I'm the CEO of the National Print Museum. So thank you for joining us today. You're very welcome to the second instalment of Cairde Cló, which is a print series where we are visiting print friends at home and abroad. And tonight we're really delighted to be joined by long-term friend of the museum, Jeff Pulaski. Before I introduce Jeff, I'm just going to run through a few housekeeping items. So just to say, the session is recorded. So we obviously can't see you, but if you ask a question or if you enter the chat with your name, we might be reading it out. So that's just something to bear in mind. You can use the little chat button below to talk amongst yourselves. I know in our first episode, people used it as a forum to announce themselves, and it was really nice to see where people were calling in from. And I know tonight we've people calling in from the UK, the US, Belgium and Ireland, of course. So feel free to have a chat amongst yourselves there. We'll use the Q&A for the questions for Jeff. I'll ask some of them as we go along if appropriate, and the others I'll keep to like a Q&A session at the end. I will state here as a disclaimer, I am not a letterpress printer, and I will therefore very heavily rely on the letterpress printers amongst you to ask the really juicy technical questions that I'm sure Jeff will really welcome to and won't shy from. So without further ado, I will just introduce you to our speaker, Jeff. Jeff Pulaski is Director of School of Art, Design and Creative Industries and Associate Professor of Graphic Design at Wichita State University. We've worked with Jeff and had the pleasure to work with Jeff on a number of occasions, from an exhibition, Imperfect Letterpress by 3, to workshops as part of 2 different conferences we had at the museum, one in 2015, Face Forward, and one in 2017, From Craft to Technology and Back Again. And we've also had the opportunity to welcome Jeff and his students to the museum on a couple of occasions. So I am now going to hand over, go across the pond to Jeff, and he's going to bring us on a grand tour of his home print studio.
All right, well, thank you, Carla, very much. I really appreciate the opportunity to be with you all and make sure I'm unmuted. I really appreciate the invitation and the opportunity. This is a lot of fun. So this is my home print studio, and I'll kind of give you a little tour. It's fairly new. I teach, as Carla said, at Wichita State University, and we have a pretty big letterpress facility. Well, not pretty big, but we have a letterpress facility there. And most of my equipment is there, most of my presses and things. And up until recently, most of my type has been there too. But right before the coronavirus pandemic started, I had started to work on a home studio, which is, I live out in the country outside of Wichita, Kansas. So we have 5 acres. It's very idyllic. I love it out here because when I get home, I can hear the birds and, you know, the breeze, and, you know, it's living in the country, which I find really very refreshing. But I started to divide a pole barn, a metal building that we have, that we used as a garage for a studio, and I basically cut it in half. So I have a studio at home that's about 24 feet deep and 16 feet wide. And then on the other side, behind some doors, is a kind of a storage space for the rest of it. But I have stuff that I just can't fit in here, or I'm working on cleaning up, storing things that I buy that I shouldn't, all of those kinds of things. And then, you know, in addition to this, I have a storage container outside in the driveway that's filled up with stuff. So in addition to all the junk that I have in here and all the great letterpress treasures that I have, I also have a very, very understanding wife who's very patient and tolerant. And so that is super important. I think most of the letterpress people that have been in it for a while will agree that having somebody who's an understanding partner is probably very important. And she has, actually, my wife has a desk over in the corner here with, she does jewelry, she makes jewelry. So that was one of my best decisions because it made it easier to convince her to let me spend money to build this. And also when I come out and work in the evenings and on the weekends, she comes out too. And so we get to spend a lot of time together. So I'm just gonna kind of pan around and show you the studio. And so kind of over on the side here, just there's lots of type. I think I have, what do I have? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Got 11 cabinets of type over here, of metal type. And then I have 4, I think, across the way in the storage area. But basically, you know, I'm really interested in looking at metal type right now. And so I've tried to combine all of that here in the studio so that I can clean and organize and sort and all of that. So you can see all of that. My desk, Angela's space, and then just more type and everything over here. So as you know, if you're a letterpress printer, you don't want to move type around a whole lot because it gets heavy. But I've put everything up either on wheels or on pallets so that it's easy to move with a pallet jack and kind of rearrange. I feel like I'm in my first apartment because I keep rearranging things and I get a different idea of how I want to do it so that things are organized. But that's a kind of a really quick tour of the studio. One thing that some of you may have noticed is that I didn't show any printing presses. I actually don't have any printing presses in the studio that I'm currently using. I have a small Nolan proof press that I'm cleaning up, and I do have a little tabletop that also needs to be cleaned up. But what I've been doing recently is more photographing of type, and so I haven't pulled a press in. But I'm not very smart sometimes. I collect a lot of stuff, and I've collected it over the years. So I actually, in the storage area and at the university and in the letterpress lab at school, I have a Model 31 Linotype. I've got 2 Ludlows. I've got a windmill. I've got a Prouty Power Press, which is a newspaper press from the 1880s that I think is very cool and I'm very much in love with. I have 2 tabletop Chandler and Price kind of clamshell presses. This little Nolan press. I've got a Vandercook proof press actually on the other side that the bed is cracked on. I haven't tried to print with it yet, but I think it will print just fine. And then at the university, I've got a challenge proof press, 15-inch challenge proof press. I've got 3 Vandercooks, 1 that's just a gravity press that you ink by hand, 2 with rollers and inking mechanisms, an iron press, and I have a couple of Chandler and Price, like a 7x11 and 8x12. So I've got way more presses than I need, but I've always had collected things with the idea of building up a letterpress studio at the university in addition to their work, so that if I ever decided to leave the university, I wanted to be able to go somewhere else and take a lab with me. I didn't want to be limited in where I could teach based on whether they had letterpress equipment or not. So that's partly why I started collecting. At least that's what I told my wife, and that seemed to work. Yeah, and I think I have some other equipment in this storage space that I probably forgot. But I think my collection of stuff weighs in at around 22 or 24 tons now. So it's a lot of stuff. My wife is very concerned about my health. If I die, what she's going to do with all of this letterpress equipment. But you know, I have lots of people that I know that have offered to come help her take care of it if something happens. So so that's kind of an overview of what I've got and what I do. Can
I just ask you, Jeff,
yeah.
in terms of that equipment, have you gone looking for it or has it found you? What is your kind of acquisitions policy as such?
A little bit of both probably, although I would say most of it has found me. I actually have not really actively gone out to look. Periodically somebody will email and say, hey, I saw a press at an estate sale, and so I'll drop what I'm doing and go and buy it. I usually hear about things. I tend not to spend a huge amount of money, and I tell people right up front, you know, this press is probably worth X amount of dollars. I don't have that. But if if you want to sell it to me for this amount, that's what I can pay, and I'll use it with my students, and I'll use it to, I'll make sure that it's used, it won't get scrapped and things like that. And if people are interested, then great. And if they're not, then, I try and help them find somebody else who's interested. One day, I mean, it is kind of funny. I think I tend to find things without meaning to. I was at a conference in Raleigh, North Carolina, and I was walking to the conference one morning, and I walked by a big plate glass window, and I glanced over and noticed that there was a Ludlow sitting in the corner. And I thought, oh, well, there's a Ludlow, and oh, there's the back end of a newspaper press. And so I thought, well, this must have been must be a museum, or must have been a press, like a newspaper or something. And so I went and asked, I went inside and asked, and it had been converted to an office, but the guy said, yeah, I think there's still a bunch of printing equipment in the back. They've turned off the power, and there's no electricity, there's no lights or anything. But they gave me the name of the building manager. And so I called the guy and I told him why I was in town actually for a conference talking about letterpress. And I told him I used to work at a newspaper and I was really curious. I wanted to see if I could go in and look at the press. And he said, oh, there's no power back there. You'd have to bring a flashlight. It's dirty. And I said, that's okay. I don't mind. I can get a flashlight. That's easy. So I went and, somebody gave me a little walk around and I was able to kind of look at the press and stuff. And I found a number 4 Vandercook that was kind of shoved in a corner in the dark. And I said, well, would you be interested in selling it? It's probably worth $6,000 or $7,000. I could offer you $1,000 and I'll use it with my students. And they eventually said yes. And so I worked out a deal. I had a show in South Carolina, I think, about 4 months later. And so I asked them if they would pay for mileage instead of an airfare. And they said yes. And so I drove my truck to South Carolina, did the artist talk and workshop, drove to North Carolina, loaded a printing press in the back of my truck and drove home. And, stupid me, I was giddy all the way because I was like, oh, I have a Vandercook number 4 now. And, it was a lot of fun. I felt like everybody I passed on the road was, cheering me on. So
that's brilliant. And I'm sure so many pieces in your collection probably have really interesting stories.
Yeah.
Is there anything on your wish list, or have you stopped collecting and you'll just see what happens, or are there things you're actually looking for to complete your collection?
No, I don't. My wife asks me all the time, when is it enough?
That's a better way of phrasing what I'm asking.
It's really not. I'm not actively looking for presses, but if any come up, I will probably try and buy them if I can, or find a home for them. No, I think now it's type. I really have enjoyed looking at metal type and dealing with metal type. I have 5,000 or 6,000 pieces of wood type at school that I've collected, but I've not lost my interest in wood type, but I've moved more to metal at this point, and so I'm more interested in collecting that. But I would take any metal type that I find.
Okay. Okay.
I can always find more room. I can still walk through here, so that's a bad thing. But yeah, that's the thing. I try not to look too much because I get too interested, and then I end up getting things that I don't have room for, and so.
Yeah, we know all about that at the museum.
Yes.
As well.
Yes,
yeah.
I think
Super.
Everybody
So
does.
let's go back to the tour then. I interrupted you there, but let's continue.
Okay. Yeah. So well, I mean, this is basically it. This is the whole shebang, as they say here. I've tried, in doing this, like I said, I put a lot of things on carts and wheels and put it up so that I can move things around, because let me grab my other, I don't know if we can switch, maybe Mary can switch the video to the studio. Can you all see the, I don't know how to pin it. Oh, there we go. Okay. So I've got, things that are up on wheels and carts. I've tried to make everything pretty mobile within the studio so that I can kind of move things around and be able to activate things for what I'm trying to do. So of course this is my wife's area with jewelry, but yeah, it's kind of a mishmash of all kinds of things currently in the studio. So yeah, and that's It's small, so that's the nice part. Mary, you can switch back to the other if you would. Maybe.
Sorry.
There we go. All right. But yeah, that's kind of the studio in a
Great.
nutshell. So
tell us about your first encounter with letterpress. How did you become introduced to this whole world of letterpress?
yeah. I went to school at Wichita State, actually. That's where I did my undergrad work. I started in 1986. And so I was kind of in school in what I call the in-between years. It was kind of in between letterpress and the computer, the Mac was just coming onto the scene in 1986. It really wasn't ready for use yet, professionally for most places, but letterpress had kind of started to wane. And so the whole time I was at Wichita State, they had a letterpress lab that I walked by, and I think I went inside one time and thought, oh, this looks interesting, but I didn't do anything with it. So I kind of missed all of that. And when I got out of school and started working in the 90s, early 90s, I was basically working on the computer constantly. And so all of the hand
Sorry,
skills.
Jeff, you studied graphic design, was it?
Yes,
Yeah,
graphic design. Yeah. So all of the things that we learned in school with cutting amberlith and masks and all of those things by hand very quickly, for me, transitioned to computer work. Within a couple of years, everything was on the computer. And so that was all great. And I love working with technology. I love working on the computer. But when I started teaching again at Wichita State in 2000, so 10 years later, one of my colleagues asked me one day, he said, hey, Jeff, would you help me move some stuff? And I said, sure, it's fine. What is it you've got? And it turned out to be about 10 cabinets of type. And as we were moving things from the parking lot into the building, I was carrying these cases of type and I was looking at these three-dimensional letter forms and all the stuff that I had done on the computer for the past, at that point, probably 14 years. It was all kind of manifest in a physical form with the letter forms. And I just got so excited. And I just thought, this is so cool. I can touch these things and handle them. And it's the letters that I love in the flesh, so to speak. And so I got very excited, and I was very fortunate. The two colleagues that I had at the university were actually my teachers back when I was a student. Jim Hellman and Kirsten Johnson were both letterpress printers. And I said, will you guys teach me how to do this? And they said, yeah, it's not that difficult. We'll show you. And they showed me a few things, and then they let me access the lab, and I started kind of working down there and asking questions, and they would come down and say, no, do it this way, do it that way. And it just became incredibly exciting for me as a type lover, so it was great. And then as I started my graduate work, I was writing my thesis about letterpress and education and design education and what the values were. And I was encouraged to contact somebody who used to teach at Wichita State but was at Purdue, and his name is Dennis Ichiyama. Very well-known graphic designer, educator, letterpress printer. He was working with Hamilton Woodtype Museum when they first started as an artist in residence. And so I contacted Dennis, and we talked and ended up traveling to Wisconsin to work with him for a couple of weeks, various times back at that time, and was able to access all of the wood type that was there. And it was just a great experience and a great learning opportunity. So Dennis was a big influence in what I did also. And so it just kind of grew from there. I wrote my thesis about working with letterpress with students. I did some workshops with students and showed them. And I've kind of found over the years, I was thinking about this a little bit in preparation. I don't know that I would call myself, I'm not a printer. I don't have a huge stack of posters and flyers and bills and things that I've printed for people or done in an artistic sense. I've got some, but I'm much more interested in showing others how to do it. And I certainly enjoy creating posters and designing things, but really for the last 4 or 5 years, since I've been the director of the school, I've done more workshops in education than I've done printing. And so I don't have a lot of things that I've printed within the last few years, but I've done workshops every year, and I've gone to various places to do those and talked a lot about letterpress and helped others with what they're doing. So
And I suppose in that role as educator, maybe you could tell us a little bit about the role that you think that letterpress can play in graphic design teaching. I'd be really interested to hear that.
yeah, the thing I like about Letterpress is it gets our students off the computer, it gets them using their hands in a very different way. And I love the way you build things. I really like that structure and kind of even the math that's involved with Letterpress and figuring out how everything's going to fit together. I love the fact that you're limited in what you have. When I work on the computer, I have access to every character I want as many times as I want it. And when I work with Letterpress, I only have 5 E's or 14 A's or whatever. So if I don't have enough letter forms in the type that I have, I have to be more creative about how I do it. I can't scale things, to whatever size I want. I have to work with what I have. And I think that challenges me as an artist and as a designer. And I like that challenge. I like the ability to have to think of another way to do it. And so that's been a lot of fun for me. And I think the other thing is I've always been very interested in the technical aspect of design and printing and things like that. And so I like building up layers of color. I like printing one thing at a time and kind of having to plan ahead for how all of that works. And it really fits for me. I like the aspect of hand setting type. I like to handle it. I like to use it. I've not done things that are really large with lots and lots of type, although I have a couple of projects in mind that would possibly use that if I have enough type to do it. I was telling my wife about a book that I'd like to design and print. And she said, "Oh, well, you've got plenty of type to do that." And I said, "Actually, I don't have enough type to set a book." And she said, "Jeff, you've got, all of these cabinets of type out here." And I said, "Yeah, but I don't have, to set a whole page of type is going to be 600 or 800 different, letters easily. And when you set a whole form," and I said, "I've got thousands, possibly millions of pieces of type, but they're all different sizes, 72 point stymie. I can't set a book in 72 point stymie very easily." And she said, "Well, you're just going to have to try." So, so I don't know if that book will ever become a reality, but certainly not with my collection. There's too many bits and bobs missing. So, but yeah, so that's kind of probably a long answer to your
No,
question.
and I was reading your artist statement as well, and I loved how you described, you'd say it better in your own words, but the way you were describing the putting the designer back in charge of the process. Maybe you could explain that to the readers a bit. I think that idea was really interesting to me, and it's something I think we get a lot of from our visitors at the museum.
Yeah, it's with the computer, it's again, technology is great, and you're able to do so many things today so easily. But when you're done, you hit print and you type in a number, and then you sit, and the computer, the printer spits out perfect copy after perfect copy after perfect copy, and or you give it to somebody else and they do that technical work and they bring you back a box and you open it up and it's full of printed finished pieces. And I love that. I don't want people to think that I don't, but I like being in charge of the process, and I like the planning that goes into it, and I like the ability to lay the type in and make adjustments, and the happy accidents that you get when something doesn't print properly, or the packing's not quite right, and you get a really interesting effect, or there's some offset that you weren't expecting, and it makes it interesting. And every piece, I don't strive for perfection in the prints most of the time. Every piece is different, and I find that I'll print 20 copies or 30 copies of something, and then I'll lay them all out, and I'll say, okay, well, which ones do I want to use, and which ones do I not? And so it puts the hand of the designer back into the piece, which I feel is really important, and it's something that's lost today. I had a friend a number of years ago who's since passed away, but he said, I can't wait until this whole computer thing is over, because I want to get back to making art and making design and I want to do it the old-fashioned way. I want to do it by hand. And I think that's actually why a lot of designers are really interested in letterpress now, is because it puts them back in the process more so than the computer does, because they're creating there as they're going. And I think I think that's the big issue that people really like. I've asked people in the past if it weren't, well, I can't remember exactly what the question was that I asked them, but it was basically, you know, are you just doing letterpress because it's a fad, or are you doing it because you enjoy the process? And most of the people I've talked to, they really like that process. And if everybody was doing it, they would still be doing it because of that. It's not that they're doing it because it's trendy or anything like that. And that's certainly the thing for me.
And I suppose that was the whole theme of the exhibition you did at the museum. Imperfect is even the title. Could you maybe tell our viewers tonight about that exhibition and any other exhibitions you've been involved in over the years, or any projects?
Yeah, we've done, gosh, there's been a number of them, and I don't remember all of them. I'd have to pull up my CV to, but that Imperfect ×3, I think, was that exhibition that came to Ireland. And that was 3 letterpress printers, Mervy Picasti from Kansas State University, who was a colleague, and she worked at Wichita State with me for a while, and she learned letterpress kind of as I did too. And so we've worked together in various things over the years. And then Joey Hannaford is a letterpress printer in Atlanta, and we met at a conference, both talking about letterpress, and became quick friends. And actually, Joey and I did a lot of workshops together.
You did one together in the museum, with Face Forward, yeah.
That's right, at Face Forward, yeah. And we've done one there, and we did one in Moscow, and gosh, a couple of other places. I can't remember where all we've done them, but it would be interesting. You know, I would call Joey or email her, or she'd call me or email me and say, hey, there's one here. Should we put in a proposal? And so ICTVC in Cyprus, the International Conference of Type and Visual Communication that Klimas Mastris puts together out of the Middle East, in Greece and everything. We've done a couple for him, and it's great fun. It's, you know, we had a letterpress light workshop because we wanted to do letterpress kinds of work where there weren't presses or types. So we would cut things out of acrylic or small pieces of wood and take them with us and just hand stamp to give people a feel for it. And it's been a great deal of fun, and it's great to work with students and professionals from around the world to kind of.
And I suppose that's the big difference, isn't it? That in the university you're dealing with students, and at these conferences you're getting an opportunity to have an influence on professionals and the way they're practicing now, and in some cases very experienced professionals. What kind of feedback do you get from them in terms of what influence that letterpress is having on their work?
Well, you know, I think it, for some people, just don't like it. Some people don't like the mess, and they don't like getting ink all over their hands, and they just don't seem to enjoy it. But most of them really do. And I think it's that kind of experimentation that they like, and the kind of feel of play to some extent that they really enjoy, because there's a lot of experimentation that I think happens, especially with designers, and it just kind of cries out for it. You know, when we print on laser printer or inkjet printer, we always print on 8.5 by 11 white sheets of paper. And in letterpress, I enjoy most printing on different colors of paper, and black paper, and things that I can't run through the press, so, or through the inkjet printer. And so that to me is fascinating, and I like that experimentation that goes on. And I think that's what people enjoy too, is the ability to do things a little differently, and really to get their hands dirty. So.
So we were just talking about exhibitions and projects. I know that I am particularly interested, I'm sure some of our readers that were looking at some of the photos on social media, in your current project. Maybe you could talk to us a little bit about your micro photography project.
Sure. Let me, I have a few other things I'll show first real quick.
Go first, yeah.
That I did, that I pulled out. So one of the very first projects that I did when I started doing letterpress was this. I actually did a book first, and there's a picture of Caslin in there if the light hits it just right.
Yeah.
Black on black, which you know you don't normally do. But this was a little bit ambitious for kind of my first project. There's a slip sleeve over it, but it basically is about a 36. Whoops. Here, let me get a little closer so we can see. 36-page book about William Caslin. Oh, the light's not very good. There we go. But it actually has a little timeline here that kind of weaves through, and it's a different size, so it kind of angles differently. But this is an accordion fold book
Beautiful.
that talks about the
First
history of
project.
Caslin. What's that?
First letterpress project.
Yeah, it
Yeah.
was. I think I did a couple of little small poster things first, but this was pretty ambitious. And I think I printed 50 copies and I assembled one, and all the rest of it's still in a box in my office. I just haven't assembled the rest of them, and probably won't. I found a typo afterwards, and that kind of frustrated me. But that was one of the projects. I used to do a project with my students that was kind of a Black History Month poster. And this is one that I had created along with them. So Dizzy Gillespie, famous jazz musician. And so that's a poster that I did a number of years ago.
Jeff, do you mind me interrupting there? It's funny because when we're doing these visits, like I know with Dave Darcy's first visit, like I know music has had a huge influence in Dave's work, and he's lots of song words and so on. And it's funny when we do these visits, obviously we don't let you play music in the background, but like, would you listen to music when you're working out here in your studio, or is it a still quiet place? I'm just trying to imagine it when it's not a presentation, when you're actually working. What kind of an atmosphere is there? Do you have the telly, the radio? Are you listening to jazz?
Yeah, I actually don't listen to a lot of music usually. I don't mind it. I listen to a lot of audiobooks. And so when I'm not setting type, when I'm just printing, I'll listen to audiobooks, or music's fine. I certainly don't mind, but I'm just not a music person as much as some other people are. So when I would go to Hamilton to work with Dennis always played kind of this great Italian kind of contemporary music that I love, but I don't know what he played, and so I don't have access to it. But I listen to things more, except when I'm setting type. When I'm setting type, I like it to be kind of quiet so I can focus on what I'm spelling.
I'm just so nosy. I love when you get photos, when different printers send us photos, like there are always cats around the letterpress studios, and you have some animals there, don't you? I think from our last chat.
Yeah, we have 2 dogs that don't come in the studio because one of them's way too big. But I have actually 7 cats out here. Since we live in the country, we have lots of cats, and 6 chickens. And my studio has been the home to one of the cats. It was a kitten when it showed up in the middle of winter, and so we kept it in here to keep it warm and safe and dry and all of that. But as soon as he got big enough, we booted him out with the other cats. And then when my daughter wanted some baby chicks, we had 6 chickens living in here for a while in a big crate. But thankfully they're outside now. They're big enough to be on their own. So, but the door is open, so something may wander in. We have various other wild animals that come around periodically.
It's just a little pattern I've noticed. I'm sorry, I'm trying to stereotype letterpress printers here, which I shouldn't do, but I have noticed the cat trend. I'll let you go back to showing your things there.
Right. Okay. This was another one of those posters on Black history. It's a quote by Frederick Douglass that I did a couple of years ago, and it was just furniture that we laid out and printed and kind of shifted. And I've always really enjoyed this print. So kind of some experimentation with specimen sheets. Again, I like this kind of black on black. Let's see if I can get it to show there. Something I did for Hamilton years ago. Kind of an interesting font that we found in Patras, Greece at a workshop that I wanted to print the whole specimen or the whole letter set because I thought it was interesting.
Nice.
And then some of the other things that I do with students are kind of terms. So this is what's called an initialism, SPQR. And it's well, there's a little definition here at the bottom, if I can get close enough, of what an initialism is. But it's basically an abbreviation that you don't sound out like a word. Like ROM would be an abbreviation. An initialism is one where it's where you just say the letters, like IBM. Or then a monogram. So we cut a big ampersand out of plywood and then printed it and printed the definition of a monogram here in the little dot. So that's just some of the work I should have brought over. I did one of Shakespeare's sonnets for the Bodleian Library when they did their Shakespeare collection a few years back, and basically every line was a different font, different size, but I don't have that here. I don't know where I put that. I really liked that. That was kind of that beginning for lots of metal type and kind of a specimen. So, but lately this project that I've been working on is, I look at the type, and I've always been fascinated by, the craft that went into it. And so these are photographs, basically. They're macro photography of letter forms. And I think this was a 24 point, I can't remember the font. I didn't write the name down of this print, but it's a 24 point piece of type that I did some macro photography of, and shot, lots of different levels. This is probably 12 to 15 photographs that are all kind of built together in Photoshop to show all the different layers. Because of the depth of field, it's very shallow. But then I printed them large because I'm fascinated by them. And so you can kind of see, this is something I don't like in my lab, of students not cleaning the type very well. But in a situation like this, where I'm photographing things, I think it's really quite beautiful. If all the type were clean and pristine, it would just be gray on gray, and it's not as interesting to me.
Beautiful.
But I've got some large prints that I've done of some of these letter forms. And I think, it's really fascinating to me to look at the letter form and to know that, some of these were created by hand, each size, each letter by hand, and then punched into, a piece of copper to make the forms for these. So this is a font called Foster. And I just think this G is quite interesting and funky, and I love the font. And I found a handful of cases of it. Lately, I found a few more. But I really like the kind of, interesting, funky nature of some of these letter forms. So a Huxley vertical F. So I've been doing lots of these, and my plan is to create a set of the whole alphabet. And I've done a number of faculty shows at the university with the Ulrich Museum of Art, and they're always a little bit miffed by me, because I don't want to just create a piece of artwork, hang it on the wall, and give it a name. I want to have some explanatory text that explains what the point of the image is. So there's a statement with each one. And with this, my vision of this is to talk about typographic terms and fonts and just peculiarities with each letter, and then have a whole exhibition that has all of those examples and the image, and then a definition or something that I explain about it. And so I've got some, maybe if we can switch to the other camera view here. If we can make that one the pinned. There we go.
Yeah.
So I've been shooting, the whole alphabet, kind of different letter forms, and trying to see what I like. And of course, I'm trying to find ones that are interesting to look at. So they're not cleaned very well, or they're kind of dirty. But there's some that I've got some iron type. So it's cast iron as opposed to lead. And then, obviously small pieces of wood type, letters with alternate characters, which I find kind of interesting, or kind of the slanted bodies. That one's not very easy to see, probably, but it's a K that's italicized, and it's quite cool. To even, some of these that obviously some students should not have passed their letterpress class if they left the type in that state. But, things like mind your P's and Q's, which I know a lot of people say is not a typographic term, but it still is feels kind of connected to me. So so I'm going to switch back now again, and then you can see on the back there's a bunch of A's. That was when I first started this process a year ago or so, I really only have time to work on this kind of work right before the faculty show at the Ulrich, or in the summertime when things are a little bit slower at school. During the school year, it's just kind of pell-mell till the end, so I don't really have a lot of time. But I started all of this with these A's, and I just thought, well, I'll shoot a bunch of A's and just kind of see. And it's really interesting because, you know, even though the difference in height is probably what 2 or 3/100ths of an inch, when I'm shooting the macro photography to try and get these things really large, I have to, I mean, the depth of field is so shallow that I'm having to shoot and then just move the camera slightly up and shoot and shoot and shoot. And so with all of these, there's some of them that I printed and displayed, and then I started looking at them and I realized I missed the focus here. There's a little place along the side where it's not in focus of the type, and so it really drove me crazy. So I think as I was shooting some of this next set, these A through Z set, I think there was one of them that I had 36 photographs to try and get everything in focus. It was deep enough. It was a deep drive that I had 36 photographs. And I'm shooting these with a Canon camera that's a 50 megapixel camera. And so every photograph is, I think, like 160 to 170 megabytes. And so I'm creating files that are 2 or 3 or 4 gigabytes, which is, if you're not a computer Photoshop user, those are huge. Photoshop does not handle them very well. In fact, some of them I had to do in stages, and then flatten, and then stack, and then flatten, and it's kind of labor intensive. But then I noticed when I get it all done, I noticed like, oh, there's one little place I needed one more shot, and there's no way to go back and do it. I have to start again. But I did some interesting things. I think I have a copy stand here, and I have a little micro adjuster. So you put the camera on here, and then you can, let's see if I can get it up against something that's not me. You can turn a dial, and it moves the camera up and down. So this is how I shoot the macro photography. Well, the problem was the little knob was not sensitive enough to be able to move it very small amounts. So I 3D printed a little knob that had a bigger handle on it so I could control it a little bit better, and kind of had a lot of fun developing something to be able to do that. And then to hold the type, you know, you're shooting a piece of 18-point or 24-point type, and here's one of the cats. They fall over very easily. But I made this kind of big old thing to basically, it opens 2 different directions. And so I can put my type inside of it to hold it so it doesn't fall over. And so that was super handy, holding all this type so it didn't get knocked over. But then since then, I need a finer adjustment. And so I found a place. I found a place here in the States, and I bought some little bolts. This is a bolt and a collar, but the difference is that this has 256 threads per inch. And so with a normal bolt, like a fine bolt, it has 32 threads in an inch. So if you spin it, you know, spin it 32 times, you move it a whole inch. Well, this I can spin it and I can get 256 within an inch. So what I need to do is I want to 3D print a little platform that I can put these in. So when I adjust the type, I can move it up very, very small amounts and get better control. So I get a little bit weird on those things, but so I have my letterpress, I have my 3D printer. I've got, you know, a friend that's got a machine shop set up that I'm thinking about having him help me just so I can shoot the type over again that I've already shot. So yeah.
It's an absolutely beautiful project, Jeff, so beautiful. And the 1 or 2 people there saying, yeah, they could see it as an exhibition or maybe even a publication. So yeah, we'll have to see maybe a future exhibition at the museum sometime. And just to say that Jeff is going to be taking orders for these, and he has very kindly offered to donate proceeds from these to the National Print Museum, which is a charity, to anybody who would like to order any of them this evening. So if you want to get in touch through the museum, I'd like to just thank Jeff for doing that as a charity. We really appreciate that, and we'd love the opportunity to share these with some of our followers too. So thank you so much for that offer. So we have a few questions starting to come through. How are you printing these? What kind of machines are you using to print these? And then someone's asking, have you ever thought of cutting your own type?
Yeah, actually, I have. So two questions. On the prints, I'm kind of fortunate at the university. We're a design department or an art department, so we have access to large format printers, and so we have a 44-inch wide Canon printer, and we have a 24-inch wide Epson printer. And so what I do is I just build everything up, and then I print it at the university. And we charge students and faculty just basically the cost of materials. So if it's $2 a square foot for the paper, and we kind of estimate what the ink's going to be, we can do them quite reasonably. And so that's what I do. I just print them on a large format printer. I'm not as happy with the new ones. They're on a glossy paper, and I like the matte paper much better. But I didn't have any, and I, as a designer, waited until the last minute to print them for the exhibition. So I had to use what I had available. But yeah, so that's how I print those. The other question was, yes, my own font. I've thought about it, and actually, I have a very interesting face. It's not here. I think it's at the university. But there's a very interesting face that David Wolski revived, and Virgin wood type cut the uppercase, and I actually have the lowercase, most of it. And so I've redrawn the lowercase, and I would love to cut that because I think the font is fascinating. But since I'm missing some of the characters, it's actually a project that I give my students that are learning Illustrator. I say, okay, so here's a font, here are all the lowercase letters, and here's what the uppercase letters look like, but we're missing 15 of the lowercase letters. So take some prompts from the various letters that we have, and let's create what the rest of these would look like. And so we talk about consistency and style, and thick and thin, and termination of letter forms, and all of those things. And so it's a great project, I think, for the students to do. They don't necessarily love it, but I like it because it helps them to think about type. But I've thought about doing that. There are so many typefaces out there, and more being added all the time. And it's such a specialized field. I have a number of friends who are type designers, and I have a great respect for what they do. And I think there's a technical aspect to it that I would really enjoy. But I know it takes a long, long time. And so I just haven't invested that in doing it. But the font that with the lowercase, I would love to have that cut so that I can print with it, because it's a very interesting. Normally I can't remember what it's called when they do this, but the thicks and thins, normally the verticals are thick and the horizontals are thin. In this font, they've flipped it so that the verticals are thin and the horizontals are thick. And so there's a name for it. Somebody probably knows, but I find that fascinating. And when I saw it, I thought, oh, this is a really cool font. This looks like something that would have come out in the 60s or 70s, but it was actually the 1840s or 1850s that the font was first released. And so it fascinates me that people have kind of been exploring these ideas for so long. So.
Super. So yeah, as we're coming to the end, the questions are starting to come in. So those two questions were from our friends, Carol and Mark, who run a relatively new letterpress facility with a very long history. So the next time you come over to Dublin, we have to bring you up to Kells to see their new space. So we must arrange that. We have Patrick, who I know is calling in from Belgium, and he says, you never got tempted to also collect typecasting equipment, would solve the issue of not enough type for a major book, and it is a trade in danger. At some point, if no new metal type is cast, letterpress printers will have a problem, or will be forced to divert to printing on computer designed plastics. So yeah, that's a question. You did mention you have Ludlows, but you don't have, that's it, is it?
No, I have a Linotype and I have
You
two
have a line.
Ludlows. I'm hopeful to get the Ludlows hooked up this summer. I've got a gentleman coming through, Dave Seat in Tennessee, who works on things, and I think I'm going to have him hook the Ludlow up this summer. But which I'm very excited about, because I have some very nice fonts in Ludlows. I've also got quite a few Linotype fonts, but I'm a little bit concerned about longevity for the Linotype, just because the machine is phenomenal. It's a great machine, but it's harder and harder to find people to work on them. So I don't know if it's worth the investment to get mine up and running, if I'm not going to be able to maintain it. And I don't know if I have enough knowledge to do that. However, something I'm thinking about, I'm planning for a future conference, possibly next summer at ICTVC. See if I can reach it here. Where did I put it? Oh shoot! I should have grabbed it. Well, yeah, I can't reach it. It's behind a few things, but basically, I'm trying to work out a system to cast type with sand casting or some other method, with the idea that instead of doing a traditional kind of letterpress light type workshop, I would take a handful of these small melting pots with me, and we could work. I'm working on how you could do this by cutting letter forms out of cardboard and making some sort of mechanism to put it in where we could melt. We could make our own print metal and then pour it. And I've got some samples of things that I've cast in sand. Sand casting's been around for a long time. That's the original way. But I just need to figure out how to make things consistent in height, because I don't know, where we're going. We may not have access to a lot of equipment. And so we've done some testing with casting letter forms, and it's kind of funny. I don't know where I put it now. Oh, here it is. I just went down to Target and bought some kinetic sand. So it's sand that's got a chemical in it that makes it stick together. And basically, we've just taken existing letter forms and kind of impressed them in the sand, and then put something around it and then pour it with metal. So I was telling my students that for a while, my old pair of shoes that I used to wear to school all the time, they had little flakes of type metal on them, because I spilled some type metal one time and it splattered on the floor and got all over my pants and my shoes, and there's still some on the floor over here. But so I've been kind of experimenting with that, because I think it would be fun to let people cut letter forms out of paper, thick enough paper that then we can cast it and then print it. But the height is the issue. We've got to make everything the right height and consistent. And there are ways to do that. It would be a pretty simple type of thing, but it could be a lot of fun. And I think, it's going to be Thessaloniki, Greece, next summer is when it's being planned. And I can think of nothing better than to go to Thessaloniki and cast type and print. So that's my goal.
Brilliant. What are your current favorite typefaces in the studio?
Ooh, gosh. I don't want to hurt any of their feelings by singling them out, but I do find Foster pretty fascinating. I think it's kind of Mac McGrew in his book says it's kind of primitive, I think is what he said. There's something, it's not a very refined face, but I find that kind of fascinating. I like that aspect of it. I've collected quite a bit of stymie lately. I really like stymie. I've always liked slab serif fonts. I think there's just something really nice and solid about them. Cooper Black, I found a number of cases of Cooper Black recently, and I'm very excited about that. I love Cooper Black. I also like the classics. I've got lots of Gaudi and other kinds of things. I wish I could find a few more of the kind of Victorian era fonts, but things from the 1800s, but they're just not, they're really not around much anymore. But I did find some recently. Taylor and I went to Oklahoma and pulled some type, and I think we pulled out about, I don't know, 8 cabinets of type. And as we were kind of splitting things up, we were getting down to the last couple that Taylor was going to choose. And I saw one down the pile that looked like, oh, I want that one. And so I said, let's look at this one that's like 8 cases down. And as we uncovered it, Taylor decided he wanted it, and it was his find, so I let him have it. But I was like, oh no, why did I say anything? I should have kept my mouth shut. This is such a cool face. But yeah, I don't know. I like them all.
Oh, no, it's a really hard question. It was a really hard question. I think I've answered most of the ones that came in. There were a few other small ones, but I think I've answered most of them. I just had one last question really for you, and I know we're just about to run out of time, but I'm really interested to get your thoughts on, I suppose, what you think the future of letterpress is, both in terms of teaching and in terms of practice. I'd just love to hear what you think about that.
Yeah, I think letterpress has always been ripe for experimentation for designers, and I'm very enthusiastic about the trend now. There's so many more people getting interested and are picking it up, and I think that's fantastic. I know that that's going to make it harder to find material, and the material is expensive. It's gotten a lot more expensive today than it was in the past, as far as buying things, and prices on eBay are crazy, but there still seems to be a lot of material out there, and I think it'll be interesting. I'm excited about the future of it. I don't think it's for everybody. I think a lot of people won't enjoy it, but I'm glad that it's being held on to, and that people are experimenting and showing it to others. I've got lots of people who ask about it and who are interested, and I think the workshops that we're able to do are really good. I think it's a lot of fun for people to be able to experiment and see and kind of have a taste for it. So I think it's a good, I think it's got a future. It's not a huge future, but there's a lot of interest right now in handmade and handcrafted things. It'll shift. I think there's some new technology will come out, and that'll be the rage, and people that paid $15,000 or $16,000 for a printing press will find that it's not worth that anymore. But I think there's always going to be a niche of people that are really interested in that history. And I think Patrick's got quite a nice collection of casting equipment, and I think you had said he had asked about the casting aspect. I would love to have a small caster to be able to cast type, but again, it's that investment. Like, you've got to get the machine, and then you've got to have the matrices, and then you've got to have all the stuff to be able to do it. But I feel like there's an opportunity there, and there are people that have those machines. And I would actually, Patrick, when I get to that point, I would actually like to come back to Belgium and set the type at your place.
Yeah,
and then come back
good
here
idea.
And put it on the Prouty Power Press. So
good idea.
Look for an email at some point in the future. So.
We got our Linotype caster up and running last year, and we were starting to consider putting it out there that we could take orders for cases of type or fonts of type. And then when COVID hit, it's been lying idle for a year. So that's not good for a casting machine. So I think our guys are hoping to get it back up and running this summer again. But I just finally, I said that was my last question, but finally, what do you, oh yeah, Patrick is saying you're very welcome. So yeah, what role do you think printing museums like the National Print Museum can play in that future of letterpress?
Oh, I think that the way you guys are doing it is phenomenal. I think that I was just communicating with somebody in Houston who wants to buy one of the Chandler and Price presses that I have, and she's new to letterpress. And I said, well, I think there's a print museum in Houston. You should check it out. And so she did, and just texted me back today that she found it fascinating. And she wants to go back. And so I think it's great. I love the fact that we're showing the artifacts. I think that the great thing about what you guys are doing and some of the other museums are doing is they're letting people experience it. And I think that's so important, not just to see the artifacts and kind of walk by and read the things, but actually be able to handle things and touch things. And it's a little bit tricky because I tell my students that I'm pretty protective of the letterpress lab. I had somebody emailed me the other day and said they wanted to know if they could have access because they just wanted to go in and goof off. And it's like, no, I'm not going to let you goof off in the letterpress lab, because if you crush the type, it's ruined. and we can't, it's not that easy to get new type. And so, I want you to know what you're doing so that you can protect it. And I think that's the great thing about museums that allow people to do hands-on, is that, yeah, things are going to get broken and we don't like that, but there's that opportunity to actually experience it and not just see it. And that, I think, is so important, and with so many things, but especially a print museum, being able to go in and see, ink the type yourself and print it. I've got great photos of different students or different workshops that we've done, where the first time they pull the print, the students are like, and they're super excited. And it's a phenomenal experience to see somebody, get that excited about things. So I think that's what I think is important. And I think that museums like you guys are doing that. And that's super important for the future of it. So
yeah, that's super. Well, Jeff, thank you so much for your time and your generosity of showing us around your home print studio and all your wonderful work and your project that you're doing at the moment. It's all just so kind of you to give us your time. And I think what I found so interesting, and I didn't understand from my first encounter with you, that this is really all a hobby, that that by your everyday job is not in dealing with letterpress. And I kind of I presumed that you were in Wichita State University, just in a little letterpress studio, and I hadn't realized that it's really a hobby for you. So it's just incredible the work that you do. So I'd like to say a huge thank you to everybody for joining us this evening. This will be up on our YouTube channel over the next few days, and our first episode, if you missed that, is already up there with Dave Darcy of One Strong Arm. So if you want to pass it on to a colleague or a friend, or someone who might have missed it, you can tell them about it there. We are going to be doing more of these. So anybody who's in Dublin, the museum is now open this week. Really excited to be open. We hope you can come and join us. For those who aren't, we're really going to try and continue our commitment to our digital programming, which we've really enjoyed connecting with the wider letterpress community during COVID. So we really want to continue that. So we're going to do more of these. So sign up to our mailing list or follow us on social media, and we'll send you the details of the next visit. Just to mention that these visits are all free, and the visits to the physical museum are free. So if at all you can make a little donation to the museum, there'll be a link following in your follow-up email, and it's on our website as well. Any little money always helps. But thank you again, Jeff. It's been fantastic. I've enjoyed welcoming you to the museum for many years, and it's wonderful to finally get to see and learn more about what you do and where you do it. So thank you so much from everyone.
Thank you for the invite. I love the museum, and I'm ready to come back.
Super. I got
my vaccination, so let's go.
Good. Well, I did see one of the suggestions there was something we'd already spoken about, is that the museum has some lovely Gaelic type. So we are going to have to arrange for you to get over and photograph that at some stage. So thank you, everyone, and good evening.
Thank you. Bye-bye.